Kathryn, we have a couple questions for you. The first one would be, how were you discovered by Walt Disney?
Oh, well, I actually was with MGM Studios at the time that Disney was looking for his Alice, and I was tested and, read the lines a few times for him, tested out, and he found my voice was the most suitable because he was looking for a voice that was pleasing to both American ears and British ears. And so that's how I got the role of Alice in Alice in Wonderland. And during the time that I was working on that role, of course, a lot of time was going by. It takes a lot longer to do an animated feature, and so I was doing that role for a good 2 years. And during the course of that time, Peter Pan was going to be the next animated feature. And so they were already thinking about the placing the characters and the roles, and they were realizing that I was pretty much going to be pretty much the same age that Wendy was, and of course it was another British role, and I was obviously British, so it almost was a given. Disney was very happy with what went on for my role with Alice, and so I just moved right into the role of Wendy as soon as Alice was finished, and that's my experience there with the studio.
Now, back in that day, Disney really pioneered the process of having a live model for the animators to animate from, and you were the live action model for both Alice and Wendy. And what was that process like?
It was a lot of fun. It really was. Yes, he, from the beginning, what they did need was the live action reference for the artists, because it's the human figure, and the human figure is the most challenging to draw. So they wanted to watch movements to see how the body reacted, the total body, and how things blended together so that the character would look more realistic, which was just so beautifully done by these great artists that were working at the time, the 9 old men who were in charge of the various different characters and played those characters, all the way through the story. So yeah, that's what happened with the live action. And when you think about what was done, there really wasn't live action with a set. You would go onto an empty stage. There was a giant blue screen surrounding the inside, and you really didn't have any props to speak of. Basically, if it was a tree and you were directed something about the tree, it was really just an art light. Or if you were scrambling over the woods or the hills, they would have planks on the ground at different levels so that you would run up and down those. So, there really was hardly anything there. You just imagined what it was like. But I had this opportunity to go to the storyboard conferences before the script and before the voice work part, and I could see the story and how it was going to evolve, or the scene and how it was going to evolve. So I would already know and be able to imagine much easier, because they had me sitting there so that I would understand what that scene was all about. And that was another exciting part of being part of that production.
As a child, I just imagined that it was terribly exciting.
Yeah.
To be able to use your imagination in that way.
Yeah.
Now with the two roles, Alice and Wendy, did you find that, which role did you prefer? If you preferred one at all, or did you find one more particularly challenging than the other?
Well, okay. Alice was more challenging because the Alice character was in every scene. And then Alice had to perform all sorts of gyrations because of the different things that happened to her. Getting very, very small, being too large, being in the bottle on the water. So they contrived all sorts of interesting things so that they could get those movements to look natural. So that was always a lot of fun. So that was the Alice part. The Wendy part, she was more of a supporting role. So she wasn't in as many scenes. Of course, Alice had to be in every scene because it was her story. So I wasn't as involved, but the nice thing was that there were other human beings to play against, because there were the parents, and there were the lost boys, and there were my brothers, and we were all working together. So we were able to interchange and have a friendship, which was really very nice. With Alice, it was more a soul performance for the most part. Anyway, those were sort of the differences in contrasting the two roles. And then, of course, with the Wendy, it was the flying. And I did have a problem with being a little afraid of heights. And when I realized I was supposed to do this being attached with a wire and being raised up and floating back and forth to get all of those movements, I was thinking, yeah, I'm going to be up there. And of course, to me, the ceiling was way up there, and I'm thinking, I'm going up there and I have to look down there, and it's such a long way down. I don't think I can handle this. But I was given some really good help with the Peter Pan character, who was Roland Dupre, and he did the live action with me. And he said, okay, we're going to wire each other. We're going to put the wires on, both of us, and we're just going to go up a little bit, a couple of inches, and we'll just do some activity. And so we just had fun with that. And of course, what I didn't realize was that he was going up higher and higher and higher to the point where, when it was right even with what the camera would need, it wasn't that high up, and I was perfectly comfortable with this, so it was okay. So I got through that, and I was able to do all of those flight scenes very, very comfortably.
Working with Walt Disney, is something that people nowadays would love to go back and do. Do you have a favorite story of working with Walt?
Not a favorite story, it's just an impression, because I was so aware that he was such a visible part of the team. He was a team player. He wasn't the head of the studio who directed what was going to happen. He had the 9 old men, and they were wonderful animators, but they were also wonderful storytellers. And he would come in to the conferences, and sometimes he'd present an idea or maybe a slight change, and he'd say, if I had an idea about doing this in this scene, why don't you kick it around, boys, and see what you come up with? So then they would do that, and then he'd come back in, and they would discuss it and decide whether it would be something great to put in or not so great, or maybe change it a little more. Everything to make the story a better story. But it was always in the team effort, and I think that was what I took with me from that experience as to who he was and what he was about.
Well, Kathryn, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Wow, thanks. That was so incredible.
She still sounds like Alice and Wendy.
She absolutely still does. I can't wait to go home and tell my kids that I spoke with Wendy and Alice, especially because Margot, when she was little, for a short time adopted a British accent because of Kathryn Beaumont.
Really?
Yes, she did. Because we watched Peter Pan and we watched Alice in Wonderland every day, multiple times a day. Parents out there, you know what I'm talking about when your child just has the same movie on loop. And so for a little while, she actually started to talk like a British child. She would walk around saying, "Look at the path," or things like this. And it took me a while to understand what was happening, and then I figured it out. She was pronouncing words the same way that Kathryn had pronounced them in the movies.
This really was an honor to be able to talk to her. Peter Pan Diamond Edition is out right now on Disney Blu-ray and DVD, so be sure to pick it up for yourself.